Alright, welcome to our second video on how to use Google Earth. So, last time we had a little bit of an introduction to how to use Google Earth, and now let's look at some of the great content that's out here. So, the first thing we're going to do is click on the Google Earth Gallery. At this time, it's also kind of helpful to mention that this is what Google Earth looks like on a desktop or laptop computer, but it's going to look a little bit different as an iPad app or an Android app or displayed through a Chromebook plugin. One of the things that you can do as a teacher is create content using this full version of Google Earth and then have your students look at some of that content or explore the location on their individual iPad app or mobile app. The mobile app version is getting new content and new features all the time, but will look slightly different than this desktop version. For example, the desktop version has something called Google Sky, which will display tons of imagery from all over the night sky and allow your students and you to look at amazing high resolution photos from the Hubble satellite space telescope and other places. But this is not currently available on the mobile app version. This is exactly like Google Earth. This is still Google Earth, but instead of imagery of Earth, this is obviously imagery of Mars. That's available. Here's the moon. And I'm changing these just by clicking up here up at the top. So while these will eventually probably be available on the mobile app version of Google Earth, currently it is limited to just imagery of Earth as of this recording, though things are always changing. So let's look at some content in the Google Earth Gallery. On the mobile app version of Google Earth, they do have the Google Earth Gallery, and I can search for lots of different things. I'm going to search for earthquakes. And there are many different earthquake level layers out there. I'm going to look for one. It's this one right here, all U.S. Geological Survey, all earthquakes for the past week. So these are all the earthquakes that are here in the past week. It's going to pull up this piece of information, kind of this representation of this, and then I can click down here where it says View in Google Earth. And this is going to show me all the earthquakes in the past week. Not surprising, the western U.S. tends to have a lot of earthquakes. Alaska, pretty much all of the Pacific Rim here, tends to have a high number of earthquakes. Now most of these are just little tiny earthquakes. This is a 1.5, but it just shows the different activity that's out there. There's been a recent increase in Oklahoma that you can talk to your students about. That's kind of interesting. Here's an area called the New Madrid Fault, which always kind of has a little bit of a rumbling going on. And check out other little ones that happen in different places. So there's tons of ways that you could use this in your classroom to find out about earthquakes that are happening and make connections about tectonic plates and geography. But there are also many other Google Earth layers that are out there. I'm going to go ahead to some that I've already downloaded previously. And let's look at a couple of different subject areas. One of the most common ways to use Google Earth in education is to take maps that are from the past and overlay them on top of our world. So this one is called Rumsey Historical Maps. And I'm going to click on this one here that says World Globe 1790. And I've downloaded these previously from the Google Earth Gallery. And some of these you can search for online and also find them online. But it takes a world map from 1790 and overlays it on top of our current map. If I take off borders and labels, it'll make the current borders and labels go away. But I like to keep it on. I find that helpful. So now, if I'm teaching a lesson on the 13 colonies, well, 1790 is a little bit after the Revolution. It's still this map is a pretty good stand-in and pretty useful for teaching about the 13 colonies. We talk about how these maps aren't quite as accurate as our current maps. Florida is a little out of alignment there. But in general, pretty impressive considering this was all before satellites. And I can teach my students about the colonies and how the westward expansion of the U.S. occurred. And Rumsey Historical Maps has dozens, and if not hundreds, of different maps out there that you can use to teach things like the Lewis and Clark expedition and overlay the Lewis and Clark expedition over a current map of the U.S. Let's look at some science ones. So this is a map of Arctic ice based off of satellite imagery starting in the 70s. And as I click forward along this, let me just bring this guy over here. Looks like it's having some trouble loading up for a second. Some of these take up a little bit of time to load because they're pulling in lots of different information. There we go. And as I click forward, we can start to see kind of the sad retreat of the amount of ice that's available, or the extent of sea ice that year. So 2004, this purple line is kind of the historic average, and then as we go forward, it starts obviously pulling away from that historic line. Some of these layers are specific to a topic. This one is about elephants in Mali. And you could use this for an entire lesson about migration and conservation. And instead of just a simple set of pictures, like our last one of sea ice, this one is a much more complex tour with narration and pictures. As I click here for play tour, it will provide a narration and take your students through a much more complex lesson. Once you become more familiar with Google Earth, you can actually start to create your own lessons and tours like this one. We're going to stop this lesson now, since we're just trying to give you a concept of what you can create here in Google Earth and what's available. So let's look at some different types of math lessons that we could use. Here's one. I'm going to zoom out away from Mali. And I've clicked on a layer called World Oil Consumption Per Capita. And this shows us, it turns the entire Earth into a basically bar graph with each country being its own different elevation based off of its oil consumption per capita. There's a similar one of these that's by total. But here's a way that you can teach vocabulary like per capita, and you can do some comparisons on how different countries use oil and how much. Great way to start making some real-world connections to math in your classroom. Now, for English language arts, there's a great tool and great website called Google Lit Trips. And if you go to the website called googlelittrips.com, you can download content that will be really helpful, hopefully, for your classrooms. This is the Google Lit Trip for the book The Watsons Go to Birmingham. And here is a way that you can make connections between literature and geography by studying all of the different places that they travel to in this book. So obviously this works really well for books that have a strong geographic component where they're traveling. There are questions built in all along the way here on the Google Lit Trip. You can just download these for free at googlelittrips.com, or you can create your own inspired by these. Here's a question stop number 9. The way that I would use this in my classroom, and the way that I use it, is to just touch on this at the beginning of the lesson. All right, class, we read chapter 7 last night. What are some things that happened in chapter 7? And they've got my questions right here. This one's about question 8, or chapter 8. What are some things that happened when they went to Knoxville? And so, rather than spend an entire class period on a Google Lit Trip, maybe I'll just use this as a way to make a connection at the beginning of class and then teach my lesson. But using this to help make strong connections every day that we're reading our book. In this case, The Watsons Go to Birmingham. Another book that we all had to read in high school, probably, is The Grapes of Wrath. And here are question marks all along the way of the Joad family as they travel from Oklahoma to California during the Great Depression. And you can use this lit trip to help build some geographic knowledge for your students and to help them make some connections between what they're reading in the book and the physical environment that the authors are talking about. And there are dozens of these Google Lit trips out there. Similar to a Google Lit trip, there is a math website called realworldmath.com. That is realworldmath.com. And when I click here on the Search and Rescue project, this is a great way that you can have project-based learning kind of supported by Google Earth. And I could have my students use Google Earth to help answer these questions. So there's a search and rescue operation that needs to occur. And when I click here, it gives me the instructions for the search and rescue operation. I get my directions on. I can divide my class up into two groups, have one group searching the primary search area here in red, and then a second one searching a secondary search area, and have to come up with a project plan and hopefully have them working together on how to solve this search and rescue problem. And these math ones are all available at realworldmath.com. And again, those are all free and available to you. Down here in the Layers section, so we've looked at the Google Earth gallery with some geographic information system files. Here are some from different websites that we found, like Real World Math and Google Lit Trips that are also GIS files. And here are some things that are just built in. We don't even have to download any of this stuff because it's just already here and available. For instance, we can just click on weather. And if you were going to have circle time every day in your classroom, you could always talk about weather and just use Google Earth to help introduce the day. All right, class, what are some things that are happening in our area today in the weather? Let's say we live in Canada. All right, looks like right now it's 64 here in our home in Manitoba. So that one, to get that, all we have to do is click there on weather, and then this is real-time information from a variety of sources providing current weather. Some other ones that are available, if we click here on ocean, there are many different ways that we can check out things in the ocean. This one here is called animal tracking, and I've turned that on. So if I find an animal here, looks like here's a great white shark off the coast of California. If I click here, I can download the track of where this little great white shark has gone. Let's download this one's track, see where it's gone. So this one's been busy exploring different little places. Here is a fin whale. Let's download its track. Wow, that's a pretty big one where this fin whale has gone. So if we're teaching a lesson about migration, a fun way to make this project happen is have your students explore different paths where animals have been migrating and to compare how far they've gone and where they've gone. Your students can even swim along the ocean floor here and see where they've been swimming in the ocean. Some other ones that are available here, and is a section here called Global Awareness. So let's click on the World Wildlife Fund. I'm going to turn off oceans so we can turn off animal tracking so we don't see those. And let's click on, see these little icons here for the World Wildlife Fund. We can see different ones that are available. So here's information available from the World Wildlife Fund. Here's one about water aid around the world. So these are all ways that your students can start to build a little bit of global awareness by checking out some of these things that are just built in to Google Earth. Again, they can see street level imagery from different places around the world as well. So a fun language lesson that I've seen before is to pick a place. Let's say if you were go to Berlin, Germany, and if I was teaching German, I could have an assignment that said, I want you to find a sign advertising something in German. So let's see how long we have to drive until, or fake drive until we see some advertisements. It usually doesn't take long because there are advertisements pretty much everywhere on Earth. Aha! Alright, I think I just passed it. But I think I just saw an ad for Coca-Cola in German. Let's see. There we go. Yep, there it was. So, well, I don't speak German. If I did, I would probably be able to figure out what that said, and hopefully my German students at least can figure that out. So, between the street level imagery that's available from all over the world, the information here in the layers, which is built in, just like the street level imagery, content from geographic information systems like the Google Earth Gallery and Real World Math and Google Lit Trips, there are ways that you can teach everything from foreign language, English, math, science, social studies, and just about anything else you could probably imagine by connecting it to Google Earth. This is a great example of using multiple means of representation to help your students explore the world and make connections between what they're learning in your classroom and what's happening in the world. Thanks for watching this video, and hopefully you found some ways to creatively use Google Earth in your classrooms. Again, the best thing that you can do with Google Earth is to get it out there in your hands and your students' hands and figure out ways that it'll be useful in your classroom. And what's most exciting is that moment when your students are out there using it to explore content, because they're going to find features of this incredibly complex and feature-rich tool that we didn't even know were there. And they're going to find ways to use it creatively for project-based learning in your classrooms and be able to use it on their mobile devices to help them continue to learn information well after they've left your classroom. Thank you so much for watching this, and good luck using Google Earth. Thank you.